Kia ora tātou, nau mai hara mai, kei raro te tūniwi tēnei tō tātou nei whare. Māku te honore kia tukuna tō tātou nei karakia, hei whakarite tēnei wahanga o tō tātou nei hui. Nō reira, karakia tātou. Tui I runga, tui I raro. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. I te kōrero, I te wānanga, pū takataka pū wā whiowhio. Te marama hunuku, te marama ahurangi, te marama ka takoto te hau o tū. Te taueke, te mārere kura, te mārere pai. Tēnā te whai ka niua, he pūkenga, he wānanga. He apiti nuku, he apiti rangi. Tui e waho, tui I roto. Tui I te here tangata I tākia mai I a Hawaii ki Pāmamau, ta hono I wairua ki te whaiau, ki te ao mārama. Tūturu, whakawhiti whakamaua ki a tīna, haumi e hui e, mauri ora ki a tātou.
He hōnore kororia ki te atua he maunga rungo ki runga I te mata o te whenua I whakaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Aro haina ngā tuakana, ngā teina, tātou katoa e pai nei roti te whakaro kotahi. Me o tātou karangatanga maha e hono mataora mai nā I tēnei pō. Tēnei te tuku I te mihi ki a koe e te tuakana, nau tātou I whakarite. Kia hui hui mai tātou I roti te whakaro kotahi, mo te ana mata o tō tātou iwi, tātou e pai nei tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi. Tēnei hoki te tangi ki o tātou mate o te tau o te marama o tuiki. Tērā koroheke, ko ngaro nei a tātou, I whakaokioki hea, ki roto o Ngāti Raukawa ki te tonga, kia whatarangi, te hunga pēnā I aia, I a tāmati, I a hirini, ngā toki nui o te wā, ko ngaro nei a tātou, me whai whakaro kia rātau, I roto I tēnei taima, me rātau te mahu e tanga iho, e noho ki muri nei, e tangi atu nei ki o rātau kraua, tēnei te tangi. Nō reire koroma haere koutou. Haere koutou kia tiwha. Haere koutou kia Rowena. Haere ki o mātou pakeke ko ngaro nei I roto I ngā wāiti nei. Ko koutou kia koutou te rangapū o te tokomaha kia koutou. Haere whakangaro atu rā. Waiho mā mātou o koutou o hāki e kakawe ki ngā mokopuna kāre anō kia whānau mai. Me a mātou mokopuna kei o mātou tahataha I tēnei rā. Koutou kia koutou, apiti hono tātou hono, ko tātou kia tātou. E noho nei I tēnei rohe o tātou o Waikato. Ko tae mai tātou I runga I te reo karanga o tēnei o ngā hui. Ki te whakawhiti whakaaro, ki te matapakitahi, ki te wānangatahi. Haere mai tātou, haere mai tātou, haere mai tātou. Nō reira, he nui ake te kaupapa kei mui a tātou I tēnei pō. Nō reira, kia poto te kakau o taku paipa. Me te mihi anō, kia mania poto, ki ngā mania poto e mātakitaki mai nā I o koutou kāinga maha I ngā hau e whā o te motu o te ao. Koe nei rā te mihi kia koutou, kia tātou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. Ko wai hikurangi te kāinga tūturu ka whānau mai te kaumātua e huri ki ahu ko ngā hua papai o teta ko ao te aroa ki te moana ka hokona ki tua o te ripa tauara I ka rewa ko te ahurei ki uta ko punana hotu ko hani nā raka make tua ana te waka. Tēnei te whakaaro ake ki tō tātou waka, mātau i reira i nanahi, e kimi ana i ngā kōrero o tērā whaitu o tātou o tō tātou waka. Hoki mai ki uta ki runga o tāre wānga. Taunua mai ki tēnei pō, patatū mai ki roto o Waikato, i tēnei hui tuatahi e whakaputa nei te kaupapa i tōna rohe. Kia tai mai kia koutou, kia tātou maniapoto e noho nei ki tēnei whaitua. Koe nei rā te mihi, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, kia ora katoa. Ka huri te wahanga kia Sam.
Ka nui te mihi kia koutou te whānau, tuatahi mihi atu kia koe agana, ni whakatūwhiro o tātou nā koutou kupa whakamoimuti tēnei pō. E mihi mai oha e te whānau ki te hara mai te mahitahi kia mātou, tēnei take o te pō o te tau. Ko Sami Kaire taku ingoa, he uri o Ngāti Pukenga, Ngāti Maru, Ngāti Kahungungu. Hei oi ko ai te tumu whakarai o te nehe nui. I'm only up here briefly, and it's basically to explain that during an emergency, we have to make our way to the back and then out to the side. That's your fire exit. There's one behind me, but I forgot to ask where it leads to. So if we could just go that way, at least I know we'll get out to the car park. And we should all be sweet out there. If you're looking for the wharepaku, it's also you just go out the door and make your right, and you can find it there in the little kind of corridor space over that way. The other part I got to introduce tonight is that we're travelling around, obviously, for the trustee review. It's a very focused piece of work, and to help support that, there's a crew of us that are going together, as you've just heard from Doug. No introductions required for him. But at the back, we also have Charmaine and Xavier, who are part of the working group as well, helping set up. Xavier is actually helping with kākaho, so if you haven't registered with Maniapoto, you can grab him, and he will help you register tonight. I believe we had a couple new ones anyway, so that's great. He's also going to look after grants and distributions. So that's one component of what we're up to. The other part I'm going to ask for our other two people that are supporting the mahi as we go around the motu, because Dougie's key role is he supports us, makes sure that we go in the right space and the right wairua. And then we've got myself, my is the 4 years experience of using the trust deed, so here to support the whānau if there's any pātai. But I'm going to hand it over to Lee first to introduce himself. I always best for last, but...
Tēnā tātou i te whānau, e mihi mai o haki au koutou i te pōnei, ko wai tēnei tuake, ko Lee Gray toku ingoa, i te taho toku whaia, he uri a hau ngō Ngāti Maniapoto, me ona hapu maha, ko mō titi te pā, tai atu ki te wai o kāwhia moana, te whenua o keno haku, ahu, me te waiharake katoa. My role in the working committee, around 5 and 6 years ago, I was appointed by the Trust Board and then TNN to be the former establishment director, and that role was to manage the setup of Te Nehe Nui, and so I've been asked to come and support our independent facilitator in that capacity, and also to answer any questions that might be relevant to that period. E mihi ana. I don't think she needs an introduction, but here's my teammate.
Tēnā tātou e te whānau, kona naia toku ingoa no Waikato Maniapoto ki te taho o Pāpā. I've been asked to be a part of the support group as well, supporting the process and being a resource person, bringing a number of perspectives, partly the leading into settlement perspective and the settlement team that stewarded through the aspirations of our kaumātua to AIP, then coming back in later as a member of Ahu and an interim member filling in a space of a departed or a trustee that left Waihikurangi, and also in my own right having stewarded through a number of reviews of deeds in other iwi and currently participating in a fit-for-purpose review of an iwi as well. So I'll bring all of that as a resource to be able to listen and hear the views of our iwi in this particular process and shape and feed that back to support Te Ao Pare in the mahi that she's doing. So tēnā tātou.
Kia ora tātou, ko ai tēnei e tūnei, e hara no Ngāti Maniapoto, ko poraurangi tētahi taha oku, te whānaua Hinerupe, te whānaua Hunara, no te Tairāwhiti, ko koroju tōku kraua, ko whaimutu taku pāpa, nā reira koutou mai e whakaro ana no teha rārangi o te Jews koe, koera tērā whakapapa oku. Ki tērā tūtaha heuri tēnei no tamate kapua, Ngāti rangitihi Ngāti whakaue, ko parekura raureti taku Nan, he whanaunga tata ki a Tifa, Uncle Tifa, ki te taho tana māma, a Auntie Hapa. Ānā reira, e mihi atu ana, e tangi hoki atu ana ki taku aku Kenneth raureti, no ina nahi, te rā, mani, ina nahi huri atu ki te pō, he mate pukupuku tērā, nā reira, kei te tangi hoi anō e mōhio ana, kua mutu te mamai i roto i aia, e takoto ana ia ki taku marae, ki rangi ao hia ki matatā, hoi anō ko tai ake taku whānau ki te whakakanohi mai i ahau, te hari aku aroha. Taku aroha me aku roi mata, kia whakawātea mai i au, te hara mai ki tō koutou taha, kia mua tonu te haere o tēnei kaupapa nui. Nā reira, koira hau me aku whakapapa, nā reira e tika ana me tangi ki ngā mate huhua o te motu. Hoki mai ki a tātou anō, he māma hau e toru aku tamariki kei tāmaki makaurau. Nā reira e mihi atu ana ki a tātou kua waiho ake i ngā whānau ki te kāinga me era e te aki ana. Kia mahana te whare, kia tipu ake o tātou pāhara keke, kia whakawātea mai i a koutou ki te hara mai. Kia ata wānanga hia e nei kōrero. E mihi atu ana i tērā tuāhua, o te whakawātea mai i a tātou, me era e noho ana ki te kāinga ki te tiaki tamariki mokopuna. Mō te āpōpō tēnei kaupapa, nā reira, me mihi atu i tērā tuāhua. Anā tuatoru he roi a hau ki tāmaki makaurau, nā reira, koira te pōtai e mau ana hau, te pōtai matua pea, me ki e mau ana i tēnei pōnei. My name's Taupare. I am the independent facilitator for the purposes of your trust deed review. I'm a lawyer in Tāmaki Makaurau, and so that's the hat that got me the gig, I guess. And so that's why I'm here, to facilitate the kōrero and the wānanga about your trust deed review. So why are you doing a trust deed review? The trustees have to do it because the trust deed says they have to do it. They have to do it within 5 years of settlement, and they need to appoint an independent facilitator to undertake that review. I do have a copy of the trust deed if anyone's interested in the section of the clause. I'm more than happy to read it out to you. And the trust deed says that, in particular, the trustees must seek the views of Maniapoto, me ngā rōpū whakahaere, in relation to the election of trustees, which is what we've phrased as the representation model. So it's a general review. The clause says that the review needs to be undertaken in relation to the operation of the trust deed, but then it says, in particular, the representation model or the election of trustees. And so myself and the working group, Sam, Lee, others, and a subcommittee of the trustees made a strategic decision that this first part of the engagement process with Maniapoto would only focus on the representation model. Nā te nui o tērā kaupapa, anā kua kite i ngā wānanga kua haere, i te wiki kua pahure, me whakawātea i tērā wā kia āta kōrero hia tērā kaupapa. So the strategic decision was made that these wānanga, this first part would focus on the representation model. E hara i te mea kua pakaru the representation model isn't broken. This isn't coming out because the trustees have heard from lots of fractions or people or stakeholders that the representation model isn't working or there are problems with it. But the trustee requires the trustees to undertake this process within 5 years of settlement. So that's what they're doing. And Nanaya and Lee and others are more than happy to explain why that clause was in there and why it was worded the way it was. So that's why we're here. So the key decision point is whether any changes are needed to the representation model which require an amendment to the trustees. Ka pai? So the process that we're doing is we are seeking the views of Maniapoto through these wānanga that we're holding. We held in Nyorohe and then throughout the motu. It's being live streamed as well. And then we're seeking the feedback in the room. Shah will also be sending out an online survey for people to fill out, which will ask exactly the same questions that we're asking tonight. And then I will compile and draft a report that will be peer-reviewed by the working committee members who are attending all the hui with me. And that report will go up to the trustees with our findings of this process. And then the trustees will need to come back out to you either with a conclusion that says, the report is clear that these things need to change, or they might need to come back out and ask some additional questions in relation to matters where perhaps that is not so clear. If any changes are going to be made to the deed, those need to be approved by a special resolution. That has to be passed by by 75% or more of the voting Maniapoto, voting Te Nehe Nui registered members, I should say. So it's a really high threshold. So again, and that's a decision for the trustees to make, taking into account the findings that we serve up to them. If they come back out to a vote of Te Nehe Nui members, are they comfortable and confident that those changes will reach the 75% threshold? And they'll have a comm strategy and engagement strategy and hui and around that process as well. But that's always, I guess, in the back of the minds in terms of what is the likelihood of a change to get through. So the other point, I guess, to make is that the strategic decision has been made to focus on the representation model, but the deed does require a review of the other aspects of it. And that phase is what we have coined the technical review. It's a legal document. There are some things that the management, the team who work with the deed every day have already identified could do with some improvements to make it less ambiguous or just work better in practice. There are also changes needed to the deed as a result of the Māori Fisheries Amendment Act. So at the end of the day, the trustees will be coming out to Te Nehe Nui members and asking for a vote to change the deed. They will also be coming back to you with the result of what they have found from that technical review and telling you about that and seeking your feedback. So this is really just phase one of that process, focusing on the representation model. The other strategic decision that was made with the subcommittee of the trustees and endorsed by the trustees themselves is to focus on key questions at these hui and backed up with the survey, so that we can really get the responses in relation to the representation model. And the way those questions and the examples under each of them, and you'll see when we start getting into it, those have been framed up pretty intentionally to try and get a reaction from people. Nā reira, mena ka rongo I roto I a koe, like, oh, hika, that example, that doesn't sit well with me. Well, then we want to hear that feedback, because that probably means that actually, if you come down to it, then tērā pēr kei te pai rānei koe, maybe that means you're comfortable with the representation model or that aspect of it as it works now. So we've put up examples as discussion points to try and get people thinking about what it is they are comfortable with in terms of various aspects of the model, or what improvements do they think could and should be made. So as the facilitator and trying to take notes and capture everyone's whakaaro, I guess ko taku inoi ki a tātou, ai harei te mea e pirangi ana kia aukati I ngā kōrero, hoi anō ko taku inoi kia aro ki ngā pātai, tainoa ki te slide whakamutunga. So I guess my request is that if the kōrero could try focus on responding to the questions, that would be much appreciated. There is a slide at the end where you get your chance to raise anything else that we haven't covered in our specific targeted questions. It just helps us to compare the responses from one hui to another if we're able to capture the responses to the specific questions. And then we will be capturing the kōrero on the anything else as well. Yeah, but we found that if we started with the big anything else question, ka oma atu te trainer, te hoiho, te aha rānei, ana he ua ki te whakapiri mai anō ki ngā pātai about the representation model and the various aspects of it. Nā reira, he inoi tērā, nēnā rānei e whakai ana koutou, oh well, kei a koutou te mana. Ai, ka pai, I think that's me. Yep.
It's okay. She's coming back, so just leave it right there. Ka pai. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to talk through a bit of the history leading up to the settlement and then get into where we're at right now to kind of get everything flowing, and then we'll bring it back to Te Aupare. So just for those that are unaware, for whether into the room today or online, 1988, the Maniapoto Māori Trust Board was established. By 2010 to 2012, the Waipa settlement for Ngā Wai o Maniapoto had been completed. Based on that settlement, it gave the ability for Maniapoto to then carry on and forge its mandate. By 2016, the Maniapoto Māori Trust Board was confirmed as the mandated iwi authority, and they had confirmed that the agreement in principle was completed in 2017. The agreement in principle is really just outlining the settlement package as it was at that time. The initial deed of settlement got completed in 2020, and then by 21 was ratified. So by October 17th, 2021, trust deed was ratified, and then it went through the last phase of its final readings. By November 24th, 2022, it was completed settlement, and then we actually completed by 2023 Te Kawa Rukuroa, which was the new strategy for Te Nehinehe Nui for the next out to 2050. Being intergenerational, I guess it never really ends, but you kind of make a line in the sand and you aim for a number. So we went to 2050. As part of that, though, we thought we'd share. So Te Kawa Rukuroa started with the premise of we took the values from the Kawenata, so 1904. The document was signed down in Mahoinui. We were able to then kind of envelop them into everything we do. So ture, whakapono, kotahitanga, aroha, Māoritanga, all the 5 values of Te Nehinehe Nui. Our key focus is for the first 5 years, because we developed our strategy in 3 phases. The first was punga, which is the anchoring. The second is tumutumu, which is where we built our base from. And the third is the rukuroa, which is the deep dive. And so in the punga phase, our key focuses have been on taiao, hauora, mātauranga, whānake, and then akanui. So akanui is the one piece around bringing our people back to each other, whether it be through virtual interaction or wānanga with the norohe. And that's been important because that's part of establishing the availability to the 56,000 members, or I should say 56,000 people that acknowledge themselves as Maniapoto, and the 33,000 members we have on our tribal registration. Part of that support was to create our two mata. Our mata are our subsidiaries. We have Waihikurangi, which is all about our charitable entity. It's helping our whānau lift and shift. And under our focus for whakatōpu, which is one part under Waihikurangi, that's about our looking after our marae, our whānau and our hapu. And then on the other side we have ahuahu, and they are part of whakarania, which is economic prosperity. So we set two key goals. One is to lift and shift the people within the iwi, and the second one is about securing and maintaining the pūtea so that it's there intergenerationally for the mokopuna of the future. So that's it. That's kind of the strategy in a nutshell, but we wanted to talk about where we've gotten to so far to date. So if you haven't been through Te Kuiti lately, if you go up on Esplanade, we've got 40 homes that are going in through a $20 million grant we were able to get through MHUD. That's called Te Kirikiri. So we're creating 20 homes that are 2 bedrooms. We're going to have 13 homes that are 3 bedrooms and 7 homes that are 4 bedroom. Those are all going to be, I'll put this in quotes, ready by July 27. So we've got a lot of work to go. We look like we'll be doing our first housing development by September. We've already started on the earthworks and it's all go. We also have marae insurance out there. So for those online, if you've got your marae as well, what we're offering is a marae policy that has been saving at least 38% up to 52% for our maraes that are engaging with this. And it's really about making sure that we've always got a wharekai and a wharenui available to us. That's the key. That's the heart of every marae, right? And that's the part we all come home to look after. Through Matakumia, we've got a procurement list set up for Maniapoto businesses. So we're involving them in the Te Kirikiri project, and then we're doing a bit of work with Linz, who's doing some work for us. We've also provided Linz the names as well. That's just for anyone that is a Maniapoto whakapapa that's got a registered business that's keen to get involved. We've got our kaumātua health insurance. Now, this is an important one to me because it's a preventative health care. So what we're really trying to do is it gets you access to checkups, regular GPs, ears, eyes, nose. We do also got ligaments and ankles, as well as rongoa, mirimiri, and then you can get access to a tangihana fund in the untimely passing of one of your kaumātua, and that's $3,000. It costs you nothing for the first year, so Te Nui covers the cost in the first year, and then what we do is we subsidise it, so it's $4 a week for that kaumātua going forwards. This program is all designed about making sure that our kaumātua are getting seen regularly and that we're trying to make the length of time they are here more enjoyable. So that's the key piece around a preventative healthcare insurance program. We've done some work with our SIPO. It was originally 6% as our minimum return. Now we've gone to 7%. Probably won't get too much into that, but the SIPO is effectively the rule book we use around our investment and how we manage our investments as we go out there. And lots of questions get asked about that, but I'm happy to take them later on. We've got our vocational training going really well, so we've got a relationship agreement in place with Wintec, working with Waikato University regularly, and we have, through a relationship through the Tertiary Education Commission and the Ministry of Education, we're able to set up a program that we ran this at the beginning of this year where for those that aren't wanting to go down the education route, you can go down and we'll do 330 hours of on-hand work where you get your first aid, working from heights, fire extinguisher, and then you can also get driver's licenses and such. That just helps our whānau get ready for those that don't want to pursue that but want to get into a mahi space. So it's a cool program. We're very proud of it. Some of the things we've had to look after and manage in the rohe is the relationships with the council. So we have 2 documents that govern our relationships. The first one is connected to the Waikato, Waipa, Otarahanga and Waitomo District Councils and the Waikato Regional Council. That's our Northern JMA, a Joint Management Agreement. The second one we have is with our southern boundaries of the Taranaki Regional Council, Ruapehu and Horizon. These have been really good because they've helped us work directly with those councils when they've got issues and also support our whānau. And a good example is during some of the storms. You know, we've had 100-year storms. We've had about 9 of them in the last year, even though it's a 100-year storm. We worked with Waitomo last year, and then we worked with Otarahanga this year in Waipa. And I mean, I'm not saying we saved the day, but we were able to get our people on the ground quickly, and very proud of the kaimahi who made themselves available. We were able to get food and shelter to the people at the marae, and a big up to our marae too, who were the first to open themselves up to stranded people that needed a place to be safe. And so that's the kind of stuff we're really proud of, and that's the stuff we're helping work with the councils to make sure the emergency management plans are in place and that we're included in those things. So when they start up now, they can come to us and we'll help them connect up through wherever they need to go. The last one I'll talk about is our tenant services contract. So that's just working with our whānau that have got challenges in their lives and challenges getting to school. It's about truancy. So we were able to become through a contract with the Crown, we're able to look after our whānau and make sure we reach out to them. So there are 47 schools in Aotearoa that we're a part of, and we're looking with, I think, is a maximum of 660 kids, but we're working with the ones in Aotearoa to make sure that they get to school and they get the things that they need in order to get through it. And it's not always easy, but the reason why we stepped into that space is we wanted to apply the māturanga of maniapoto into the kaupapa, so that way when we're working with these providers, they understand that when you're working with our people, this is how we want you to work with them. So a big thanks to the team for getting that sorted as well. All right, so I get to do this part and then I get to sit down now. So the rest of us, Nanai, Lee and I will just come and hang around at the tables, answer questions if you've got them. But we thought we'd start off with a great kind of clip that captures where we've come from and what were some of the drivers.
We set up in 1980-81 the Maipac Trust and found that we needed a Maori authority. So that led to the set up of the Trust Board. And of course we had to get our head around as a tribe how that was to be structured. And all the stats showed us that at that time 80% of our people didn't live in the Rohe. And the concern was that we need a fair way of ensuring that the haukainga were well represented on a board, that it wasn't outnumbered by those who lived away. But we ended up, I identified 6 regions that we could work with, that the marae would then affiliate to those regions. And I think we had a hui about that in October 1987, which to my surprise they just adopted with little change and minor amendments to the names that I had given to the 6 regions. And I think it was in 2011 the 7th region, which was Kawhia Mona, came into being. When I look back in Maniapoto, there was no previous iwi formal organisation, particularly one to be recognised by the Crown. But I leaned heavily on the kaumātua, Rua Anderson, Bob Emery, Tuke Tere, John Davis. I used to take my hit team to every hui, and it was bloody great. They used to come in and lay down what the kaupapa was and what they expected, and then used to call on me to provide the details. So I felt really, really protected by the kaumātua that they did. And it was just total support. I just had no resistance. It was a lot easier setting up that based on the kaumātua being involved. It was designed to ensure that everyone was included. There's no exclusions at all, that everyone had at least one way to participate.
When I reflect on the settlement negotiations, I reflect on the period just before I was asked to come in, and a mandating process had taken place. It was quite a contested time and challenging for those who were stewarding through the mandate. So the Maniapoto Māori Trust Board eventually were affirmed as holding the mandate for the negotiations. A team was set up to interview potential negotiators, of which I was encouraged to apply, but in our Māori I was voluntold, dear, you better put your name forward. So during that time, we started to look at all the submissions that went to the tribunal and understand from within the rohe what were the aspirations, and certainly get direction from the Trust Board about how the settlement could achieve to create prosperity, sustainability for the iwi going forward. We had a technical team at the time, and they were kaumātua. The structure, which was consulted on, largely mirrored the inheritance of what the Trust Board structure was. And if you can appreciate that moving towards settlement is always a really challenging kind of space. But like our tupuna, when they set forth, on a journey, if their forecastings was slightly kind of out, they weren't afraid to adjust the course in order to get to where they needed to go. And that's kind of like the journey we're taking. Really, the whole aim of the review mechanism is to give ourselves an opportunity to reflect, review and adjust. Structurally, the transition from Trust Board to the PSGE, transition from pre-settlement to settlement to post-settlement required a review mechanisms. And so it gave us an opportunity to look at ourselves and say, are we where we thought we would be? And if we are, what does moving forward look like? It's when we consider 90% of our whānau live outside of the rohe. In the rohe, representation is important, but more and more when there's an expectation to ensure that the settlement is relevant to the needs of our whānau today. Again, we might want to reconsider those elements of effective representation at a governance level, and importantly, how that relates to the whole of the iwi and our kaitiaki responsibilities that reside within our rohe of Te Nehene Henui. I think we have to ask ourselves, are we fit for purpose? Are we a sustainable governance entity for the way in which the needs of the current generation and the future generation require us to be? And we shouldn't be afraid to ask that question and then answer it and then do something about it.
Ka pai, awa e mihi atu ana kia matua Dan rawa ko Nanaia, mo te rauwhitio. All right, so just before we get into the specific questions that we are asking you to answer, a reminder of your current representation model under your trust deed. So you have 14 trustees on the Te Nehene Henui board. Once they become a trustee, legally they do all share the same duties and responsibilities to make their decisions in the interest of all of Maniapoto and the people who can benefit from that trust. So they bring the context of how they were appointed or elected onto that board, and they do represent the people who put them there, but also they are required to make decisions on behalf of everybody. The majority of seats are held by kura tau, and that is when you are comparing kura tau versus kura rere. So you have 7 kura tau and you have 6 kura rere. So we say when comparing those two elements, the kura tau holds the majority. Of course, out of 14, 7 isn't a majority, it is just half. So we're just, when they use that wording, we're just comparing kura tau and kura rere. You have a kura kaumātua as well, and we'll go into the specific aspects of these 14 in the next slides. And your deed also provides for a maximum 9-year term. Excuse me. Which means that a person can be re-elected 3 times, and then they have to stand down. There's a mandatory stand down period. So 3 plus 3 plus 3, and then there's mandatory stand down. And so we've got a slide asking whether this group agrees with the mandatory stand down or whether you think that should be removed. and the election process is how the people decide whether somebody should come off or not. So these are your 7 whare, and I've got a slide coming up about how the Kuratau trustee gets onto the board from the 7 whare. Today we're not talking about whether the marae are appropriately distributed between the whare. We're not talking about whether the trust gives each whare enough money compared to the number of marae in their whare. We're talking about whether the process to get to a Kuratau trustee is appropriate, works well, or could do with some improvements. There is a process in your deed already for a marae to move from one whare to another if they want to. And then in relation to funding and things like that, we consider that to be an operational matter for your trustees and their management team to address and think about, as opposed to representation on the board. So your Kuratau trustees, the way they get onto the board is that each marae in a whare is able to appoint 2 people onto the rōpū whakahaere for that whare. And then from that rōpū whakahaere, those individuals decide whether they would like to be the Kuratau trustee or not. If there's only one person from a rōpū whakahaere that puts their hand up, then that person will become the Kuratau trustee. Kua mana, there is no election for that whare. If more than one person puts their hand up to be the trustee, then there will be an election, and that election goes out to, available to all of the Tinehinehenui members who have chosen that whare as their primary whare. So that is how your current Kuratau appointment process works. Kurarere, the 6 kurarere are what we call generally elected. So a person can be a Kuratau trustee. They can be a candidate. They get nominated by any two other people who are registered members of Tinehinehenui, and then it goes out to a vote of all of Tinehinehenui members who participate, and then the 6 highest polling people get in for a 3-year term. So that is how your 6 generally elected kurarere trustees get onto Tinehinehenui. And then you have a kura kaumātua. So the 14th trustee seat is held by a kaumātua. Te rōpū kaumātua comes together, they have a hui, and then they choose somebody to be the representative for them on the trust. The trust deed is very light in terms of 1, who is considered to be a kaumātua, and 2, in terms of the process for them getting to the point of being a rōpū and then appointing a trustee onto Tinehinehenui to represent them. They have come up with a policy around that, and so when we get to the question about the kura kaumātua, Sam will be available to answer any specific questions around that process if there are any. But at the moment, I guess the point is that the trust deed is light, and it basically says mā ngā kaumātua tērā e whakarite. So, our first question that we're asking you guys to have a chat about, and then Shah and the team will come around with the mics. So we ask that if you are contributing to the hui tonight, please use the mic so that the people on the live stream can hear what you're saying. So this is focusing on the Kuratau trustee appointment process. So the broad question is, how should Kuratau trustees be elected? Or how should the voice of home, the voice of the marae, the kaitiaki whenua voice, how should they get onto the trust board? Do you like the current process, or do you think some changes could be made to it to improve it? Or do you not like the current process? You don't think that the RMCs from 1987 or 1988 are appropriate, and you think that, me whiua tērā, and you should come up with a whole new model and way of appointing people to represent the at-home voice. So that's what this slide is getting at. really keen for whakaaro on this. We've put up a couple of examples again to test where everybody is at on the spectrum of views. The first example is rather than the rōpū whakahaere members opting in or opting out of being the kuratou rep for that whare, would it be appropriate for the trust deed to say a rōpū whakahaere must put up at least 2 people and force an election, so that it goes out to the members of Maniapoto who chose that primary whare for an election? So how does that make you feel? Do you have an adverse reaction to that? Do you think e kao mā te rōpū whakahaere e whakarite? Well, mena koe rato whakaaro, maybe that means you're kind of okay with the way it works at the moment. And then example 3, while it's not perfect, it is really just getting at whether there's anyone in the room who thinks that the whare model as a way of clustering groups together and then having a trustee for that cluster, whether that way of clustering is still appropriate and fit for purpose at this day and age, having regard to where it originated from. So, yeah, those are why those examples are there, are really just to test how people are feeling about the way the kuratou trustees are appointed onto the board. And so if you can have regard to the whare that you have chosen as your primary whare and the way your kuratou trustee has been appointed, that would be helpful. But if you want to talk about someone else's whare, kei te pai hoki tērā. Ai, Lisa. Oh, me mawai te mai ke hari.
Kia ora, Lisa Murray, te kuiti pā, mōkau kohunui and Maniaroa. So really appreciate the context that's been set this evening. I'm also really mindful that it's 10 to 7, so we've had 50 minutes of context setting, and we're going to be asked a series of questions. I think there's 4 or 5. I watched the te kuiti pā one. Then we're going to run out of time to get to the other parts of the trust deed that a number of us want to contribute to. And so my question to you, Sam, Te Aupare, is will you put enough time aside tonight to get to that end question where we can contribute other matters? In the email that's been sent out to all iwi members, it is really clear. It says trust deed, review, engagement, not representation. So I've come here tonight with feedback about the rest of the deed and representation, but that's only one part. And I'm starting to see this pattern across the hui that have taken place to date, that the whole focus is designed to be on the representation when we were clearly told it was trust review.
Ka pai. So we will have enough time to address the last slide, but it is asking about the representation model. And so apologies if there were misconceptions about this feedback process. But for the hui that I've been involved in, the strategic call was made that these hui would be about the representation model. And then when the team comes back with the results of these hui, that will be the chance to look at the balance of the trust deed. And the reason for that is because the representation model, 2 reasons. The representation model itself is called out as specifically needing to be addressed. And so therefore we considered that the drafters of that at the time must have thought it was he nui te rā kaupapa, it couldn't just be one of many. And so that's why the decision was made to do it in a 2-stage process. Hoi anō e whakapāha atu ana ki a koe me nā kāreti rai te marama I ngā comms. I can only apologise if the comms haven't made that clear in terms of the intention of tonight, and we can rectify that going forward. Ka pai. Right, pātai anō.
Masi te kanawa. When you talked about that follow-on, what's the timeline and what does that process look like? So if we are focused on representation and the election in this hui, what's the timeline for the rest? Because there was nothing in, like as Lee said, I've pulled up the email, on the Facebook post. We haven't got any context or information or documents, no discussion document, nothing to say this is the fuller process. So this is why people have come tonight for one kaupapa, and now we're getting targeted into a part of a kaupapa. So I'm interested in what does the broader timeline look like, because that wasn't on any of the comms, that this would be a two-stage process.
Yeah. So we go to Australia in July, so I won't be writing a report on this stage one of the representation model until that part has finished, and then the trustees will be directing us as to, depending on the findings of that, what the process will be and the timetable will be for the second part, which is reporting back on the representation model and then the other aspects of the trust deed. So yeah, that comms will come out. It hasn't been confirmed yet. I guess it's safe to say it is not tethered to the elections, that it's running in parallel. So the process will continue on regardless of the current elections that are underway. It's also not tethered to the AGM because at the end of the day, any decision to amend the deed has to be by special resolution, which is done by a postal vote under your deed. So I guess the trustees were needing to allow the time for this kōrero to take place to see what the feedback is, what the attendance is like, and then that will set the scene for phase two, having regard to all those data points and the level of engagement that we've had from the hui to date as well.
So Sam, are the trustees committing to another round of consultation hui on the matters that are not covered in this this workshop? So is there a commitment there to do that after this process for the phase one rolls out?
Ka pai. So, good question. We're going to do the trust deed review. So today is about the key part that's called out in the trust deed. It's got its 2 paragraphs in there, and then there's an element of all other aspects of the trust deed. So when we get through the questions today, there is a part there that opens up saying anything else you want to add, and then we'll come out and we're going to do a second round, which is going to be more on the technical components of the review. Oh, I shouldn't call them technical. The things that aren't working in the trust deed itself. They might be the huppers, they might be the references to things that are no longer established, but there's a number of things that we've still got to do. So yeah, there is a commitment to come back out. We'll come back out hopefully, I shouldn't say the dates, but I'm hoping we'll get back in August to start the next round because we've got to move on this anyway. So the iwi wants to know, we'll get out there and do our best to make sure we get in contact with everyone. Kia ora. There's another hand. Ka pai.
Kia ora, mata tēnā, te kuripā. So what I'm hearing from you, Sam, then is the commitment that the rest of the review will be done by October 2026 as per the 5-year trust deed review date, because that's what our trust deed review date says, yes?
Ka pai. The board has got a definite clear steer to get this done and in a timely fashion. So yes, that is a fair assumption. It just means a lot of mahi. I will add though that there is a question at the end where we can open up and have all of these partai. But haere tonu, carry on whānau. Just keep, yeah.
Kia ora. Jackie Taituha. From quite a few places back home. Look, so I feel like I might be labouring something that's going here, but I've been a bit out of the space for a little while. I clearly remember when 2021, and the deed came out, and there were things in there that I read, and I was like, I want to say something about that. And I remember hearing, in 5 years' time, we have to review this deed, and you can have something to say about it then. And so I get, we're talking about the representation model now, and then there's some technical stuff a bit later, and then there are some other things as well, and those are the things that were on my mind 5 years ago. So I'm really keen that we get the opportunity to talk about some of those things and what's the process to sort of trigger that so that we can feedback about some of those other things.
Yeah, kia ora, I appreciate that. Well, I guess the simplest answer is that if we can get through the mahi here, we'll get more at the end of it, and happy to stay here and carry on having those partai. We have found that on the other reviews we've done, we've gotten to the end and been able to have just a general conversation with a lot of things that people have on their mind. What I do, and I'm not trying to shut it down here, but what I would err on the side of caution is that the night is not as long as it used to be. So if we get through our apartheid today, and then we'll get into it, and we'll come back out on the road and do another round with the trustee review for some of the elements in there that need to be discussed. Glenda, you had a question?
Yeah, kia ora. Just really quickly, I'm just really mindful of the time frame we're committing to, and knowing that there's also an election. So are we going to lock new trustees into a conversation that they haven't been a part of as well, and how are we timing that in together, knowing that we're talking about the trustee review, and then we're going to go and we're going through general elections shortly, kura taua finding there. So I'm not sure if that timing is really realistic, and I'd rather us be clear with the people to say, actually, you're not going to be able to talk about the rest of the trustee. We're going to have to get into election time after August, September, rather than us thinking that we can have those conversations beforehand.
It's a good challenge. The reason it's an independent review is because it's done separate to the election process. So our team have already got the election process underhand, and if you're looking to sign up, the Kirikiriroa nominations opened about June 3rd, I think it was, and they closed in early July. But that's my team's mahi, and we've got that well underway, and it's being kind of running on a concurrent path. So I'm not too worried about this, because the focus here is get the information as much as we can, have these questions tonight so we can have this kōrero, and then we'll come back with the final components once we can do a feedback piece.
Sam, I think Leah's question was really around what are we locking other trustees into. So yes, the independent review, will go independently, but then the trustees may change in that period. So I think that's what I heard. And they have to approve it.
So the process itself actually sits with the iwi for approval. The trustees have to make the determination on the changes, and that'll happen before the elections. And when we come back out, that is actually for the iwi members. So each of you will get a vote, and then that announcement will be made at a special general meeting. So I guess I'm not arguing the point, I'm just highlighting that when we get to the part where we have to do the voting, that'll all be set in place on what the whim of the people have made clear. And then that'll be called mana. So we'll come together for a special general meeting at that time.
I think it's the trustee also says that the trustee review process will be initiated within 5 years. It doesn't say that it must be finished by the date that is 5 years, and if you don't, all your trustees will be in breach of it. So I think that kua rangona ngā kōrero, sounds like we need to improve the comms. But I think that we don't. Yeah, the focus on the timetable, I think, might be a bit of a red herring, because it is a requirement to initiate a review. And the new trustees coming in will, need to pick up on where the outgoing trustees came from, which is to read, if it's at that time, to read the report that the independent facilitator and, as peer-reviewed by all of the working group members puts forward to them, and then they'll have the same duties as everybody else to have regard to context and ask questions to understand that. And then it will be up to them to decide how to then roll into the phase 2 process, or if we're in the middle of it, then they'll have to pick that up. But the deed doesn't say that the review needs to be finished by 31 October or whatever that October date that I heard from the floor. So I think from the trustees' perspective, it will take as long as it takes. And if there's an expectation from Te Nehi Nui members that that they'll spend as much time on the other aspects of the deed as we have on this, then we will feed that back to them, and they will take that into account when they're making their decisions. So I think we've heard those concerns, and we can definitely feed that back to them so that they're aware of that kōrero, and that they ensure that and we've got trustees here, or Gannon was here. Well, we can all tell them over a cup of tea. Ka pai?
Can I just say, you opened this with a strategic decision on the rep model, but from what I'm hearing that's been spoken already, I don't think anyone's come prepared for that,
because they've got broad issues within the deed trust. So you're asking a question that none of us have prepped ourselves for, because the lack of comms the trustees did not send out. It's not making it easier for us as the members. So, you know, we're going to sit here, we're going to look at what you're presenting and make it a lot of talk, but we're not ready because this was not sent out in the comms. And from what I've heard already, I don't think anyone's prepared to discuss your strategic, your decision.
Yeah, not my decision. Hoi anō. If you aren't ready to answer the questions, kei te pai tērā, you can give your feedback to the questions in other ways. You don't have to give your feedback tonight, but the purpose of tonight is for anybody who does feel comfortable to respond to do so.
Kia koutou, Brett Crown for Mangapihi Marae, ngā te rere au. Just to follow on, and the ladies at the back of me have already spoken enough on the direction we're supposed to be in. I just have a question regarding the Kirikiriroa trustees, those questions that you are asking, and I myself have not had much to do with. I've just been in the background watching and listening and following the lead from the person that I'm supposed to be following, who's our trustee. But the question I have is this: I'm supposed to be the comms for my marae. At this point in time, and I've been on air since for about 5-6 months, and the comms that I've had to relay back to my marae, I haven't been able to, because I haven't had any comms to relay back as such. I mean, I took all the mahi that Sammy fellas have done. Kei te pai. However, for us down in the bush down there, we're sitting there, and my whananga down there are waiting for me to send back some comms in relation to what's happening. I have one example, and this is going back, but it's about the 40 houses that have been built in Te Kuiti. I didn't even get a chance to give comms back to our marae in relation to that. And I was asked, did you not know? And I said, well, I'm the comms, but we didn't get comms. So I as one of the wharia members for our marae, I'm just asking that question. I'm asking this question: do you have any feedback for how everyone else is finding the structures so far? This is my question.
We've had lots of feedback from the hui that we've held in the rohe. We've had really good engagement. We're ko wānanga hia i nei pātai ki ngā tepu.
The only comms that I really could have relayed back to my marae would have been Taiao comms, which is with the Conservation Department. Those are the only comms that I've had for TNN. So, kei te pai. Kia ora.
I sense that Te Aoparia is fielding a lot of responses to directions that she was given from the executive, and I hear the acknowledgement in the room that she's inherited a set of requests and a task to achieve. But I can assure you, having sat in a number of the other forum, we have had enough time to answer the remit that she's been given, which is what she's explained, answer those questions, and then substantially address the broader issues that you want to have a conversation on. So we should use the night as best as we can to answer the questions, because I think we'll get them through them fairly quickly and then get to the point that you want to get to, which is identify all the broader issues of the trust deed that you want to have a conversation on.
Tēnā koe te tuakana. Nā reira, nā runga I tērā, mēnā koutou mai hia ana. For those who are comfortable, we would really appreciate that you have a little wānanga about this question and then give us your feedback about it. Ka pai. Okay, kia ora, kia ora. We'll get, Shah's going to come around with a mic, and each table can let us know your whakaaro. Please use the mic because of the live stream. And yeah, karafiua.
Kia ora tātou. Glenn Tutu, Mokai Kāinga Marae. We wrote down 2 things on our piece of paper. We wrote down ahi ka and hau kāinga. So I'm just going to talk my whakaaro that I gave, and then the others can chip in if they would like. For me, my preference is the status quo, example 1. The caveat to that, though, is that if there are candidates that want to contest the process, I think they should have the right to do so. So I've heard sort of through the kumara vine that there might perhaps be some whare that are sort of screwing the scrum or maybe putting some pressure on candidates to stand down. Ko taku nei whakaaro e hara tērā i te tika. So I gave the example with te whare ki ngā tai o kāwhia. So we've got 5 marae, 10 people. If amongst those 10, 2 choose to put their names forward, then those 2 should contest. They shouldn't, or one of them shouldn't be getting rung by the other 8 and going, actually, Uncle's standing, you need to take your name off the ballot. I don't think that's right, and I think we need to change that sort of behaviour. But other than that, example 1. But Tony, did you want to add your whakaaro?
Kia ora tātou te whānau. In undertaking to... Tony Magnaho. In undertaking consideration of the question that's pitched, we look at the underlying premise of why the structure is there. What's the purpose of the structure? And what's the difference between kura rere and kura tau? So our rōpū considered that taking away the mana of the hau kāinga and determining this by having a more wider input into proceedings took away that sort of the kaupapa that underlined that. And because the kura rere sort of is the popularity contest and the wider intelligentsia that resides around the world that we're looking to bring in. But really anything that compromises the acknowledgement of the hau kāinga and proceedings would take that away. And for me personally, if you look at the trial period of the MMTB days, the process of number 1 survived. We worked out all the wrinkles over the course of the day. So for me personally, and for our little rōpū here, it seems to be the box that we tick. No? Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. I feel like I'm double dipping here because I went to the wharehui and the same stuff came up on our paper over here. So the whakaaro here is kei ngā marae te mana. So the mana of the marae, selects the kuratau representatives that go through. However, into Glenn's point, it's probably not tika to be doing the old, no, you have to take your name off so that person can go forward. That is, that's part of the arbitrage opportunity or the loopholes that come about because of the structure. What we talked about was, in the last wharehui, was if there's more than one candidate goes forward, the mana of the marae is bypassed. It goes straight out to another election. So you have to spend money to run an election when the people that know those candidates best are actually sitting in that whare. So one of the opportunities that we have structurally is if all the whare representatives come in, they're in the whare, and they're sitting for a year before the kuratau representatives go up onto the board. You've basically had a whole year to audition in front of peers that know how you operate. That's a better selection process than letting it go out to whānau that actually don't know how those people operate. And so if you offset it, you basically can turn those whare into basically mini governance training opportunities. So the whakaaro is you offset it, allow that time for people to know that person or those candidates that are putting their name forward, and then let the marae actually pick them that are in that whare. However, the caveat is you tighten the process for how that happens. So there's no loopholes. There's a prescribed process at the whare level.
And if we can just to make sure we put all of our kōrero on there, that can we, as part of the comms, can we stop saying kuratau has the majority, because they don't, and it does insinuate to our general whānau that they do have dominance on the board, but they don't. So if we can just stop saying that, that would be probably helpful for them to just better understand the facts, the reality of it. And there's some kōrero on here as well about effective representation needs appropriate resourcing. So kuratau have way more responsibility instead of kurarere. The whānau that sit in those places to report, they're looking after a whole heap of conversations at a marae level that kurarere don't have to deal with. So that resourcing allows them to be effective representatives of us.
Kia ora tātou, Carleen Puriri, Te Kopua Marae. We agreed on some things, but not everything the last two ropu have spoken about. So definitely the mana to sit with the marae. But we actually saw value in both example 1 and 2. And just noting that the ropu whakahaere all have different numbers of marae within them, and sort of picking up on that, thinking that, well, the mana should sit with them to determine whether they want the current process or if they would want to move to the second example. We also talked about the administrative part of elections, and honestly, right, postal votes and all those sorts of things, it's costly, takes a long time. And so talked about, in addition to example 2, where you've got 2 or more candidates, that they're actually, as they're voted, and you'll get your top candidate, but the second one could potentially be a sub-in if the elected candidate can't carry on in the role or something like that. And that just helps to bypass that whole admin process of voting, should you need that to happen. Do you want to add anything? Fabulous. Got it all.
Kia ora, Dan Takanawa. I probably need to apologise now for what I did 40 years ago. So if you've got a headache out of it, oh, well, enjoy. The big issue has been identified now is 92% of Maniapoto don't live within the rohe of Maniapoto, but the responsibility for looking after the maraes that everyone belongs to rests with the haukainga. And so it's to respect the mana of the maraes and of the haukainga, the people that commit themselves to ensuring that their taonga that belongs to everyone is alive. So that was and protected. So that's the basis of the separation. But we all got to remember that doesn't matter where you came from, a kurarere or kuratau, you're all there to look after the 56,000 Maniapoto that are represented. So And I know people say 14's a big number, and if it had the ariki rep on it, it'll be 15, and people say that's a hell of a lot. But I'm mindful there's a Ropu down in Wellington, they've got 122, I think they call it Parliament. So I think we just keep everything in perspective. We didn't come to any conclusion because we were contemplating, and it highlighted a problem maybe in the comms that people didn't have time to prepare for the questions because somehow it didn't work through. So I think a requirement of Maniapoto people is that they're prepared to make decisions if they're well informed. Kia ora.
Kia ora whānau. Darren Wise tuku ingoa, Maniaroa marae, Moka Kirunga, rep. I'm pretty new to this part of the process, but in the short time I've been involved, I've learnt a whole heap. Communication is a major issue from my side. I'm the communications person for Maniaroa, and I actually don't get a lot of information through. The other thing is, whilst being in the whare, there's also a restriction on how much we can share with our whānau too, because we're going through issues with inside of our whare that need to be kept sort of low-key until it sort of comes back to the iwi to sort of help push that through. But also inside of that, we're not even sure often whether we're going to get support from that side of it either. So inside of the whare, we have a member that's part of the board, but they're also restricted on how much they can share back to us based on their information, and they're also getting shut out of working for us as a whare. So for some of that, we've got a little bit of a conflict, and amongst all of these things, back to our whare, back to our iwi, our home people. So yeah, there's a lot around communication for me personally, and being able to share it back. And what can I share sometimes? Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou ina whakaro. So the next slide is focusing on the kurarere trustees. So again, you have 6 kurarere trustees who are generally elected. At the moment, the process is that anybody who is a registered member of Maniapoto can be nominated by 2 other registered members of Maniapoto, and then the 6 highest polling go through. So do you agree with that process, or do you think some amendments should be made to it, or improvements? One idea is that somebody who is looking to be a kurarere trustee may have to also seek the endorsement of the whare that they have noted down as their primary whare. And then another example is whether somebody who is looking to hold a kurarere seat they get their 2 cousins to nominate them, but they also have to get the endorsement of one of their Maniapoto marae. So those 2 examples are there just to test whether there's any appetite for that, or whether you think that the process for the appointment of, for people to be in the running for a kurarere seat is fine as it is. Ka pai?
Ka pai, korite tātou? Ai, alright. So we're going to do... Ko ai te tepu e rite ana. Te tepu a Lisa. Oh, cool. Te tepu a mua. Okay. So we're going to do a quick whip around, and then there is a little bit of supper out there, so we'll just do a working supper, ne? So give us your kōrero, we'll go out and grab some kai, mā tētahi whakapai te kai, I mua I tērā, and then we'll come back for the next lot of questions.
For our kurarere page, and I'm really mindful that we're standing between kai, so the example we liked up on the screen is example 3. So we believe that if if you're going for kurarere, you need to be nominated by your marae in order to then go up for election. We also believe that there should be a decrease in numbers, so not the 6. We believe that there should be a skills matrix for our people, so our people are clear on the skills that are required. And so when you have the right skills and the reduced number, it will still work. So the skills part is big, and not enough people are talking about skills, and these generally elected seats become the popularity contest, so we're not down for that. And then we've got there is no two-stage process or two-stage filter for kurarere versus kuratou. Do we want to expand on that?
Oh, sorry, that was me. If you look at, and I'm going to use Waikato Tainui as an example, in order to get onto the executive, the first thing you have to do is actually be put there into the parliament by your marae. So they have to think you're competent enough to go through to the parliament. And then from the parliament, the whole parliament has to think you're competent enough to go on to the executive. So even though it's got its challenges, it still has that filtering process. For the kuratou, it's the same. In order to get onto the whare, you've got to pass by your marae, and then to get onto the executive, you've got to pass by the whare. So again, it's harder to get on through the kuratou than it is the kurarere. Kurarere, probably appropriately named, you can fly on through. A couple of signatures, you're in there, you get a shot. So we think that needs to be tightened up a little.
Mai ora whānau. Puiwara taupo toku ingoa here tēnā no Ngāti Manipoto. O Parire Marae, chair. So we have further questions, and just like Auntie said just before, how can you determine skill sets? From people being nominated or nominating themselves coming through kurarere. Because you might need an accountant or whatever, but people that get nominated could just come with expertise over taiao and whatever. So that was one of the questions. And another thing is that also, how do you determine getting in by getting supported by marae or by whare? If for one example, the whare don't know your family, or you weren't raised by them, or there's issues between whānau and whānau from their marae. So how can I get signed off? Talk to my papa now. How can I get signed off if there's rarus behind the doors and I have to get that whānau to sign me off, but my expertise is above their mokopuna that wants to come through in the same? So those are my questions behind that. I don't have an answer. So kia ora.
Kia ora. I'm glad you're starting to appreciate the whole challenge of this exercise is how do we design processes that protect us from ourselves. So now, after 40 years, maybe we need to start looking at a mechanism where people can submit an expression of interest to be going to the next phase, and if they submit that, then they're expected to attend certain courses where they're familiarised with the skill requirements of the next stage that they want to pursue, and they get a score out of 10, and if any of the members are sitting around with a 9 or an 8, they're probably going to feature and be appreciated more by the people who've got to vote, that they have got meet a high standard of capability and skill. Because the reality and the downfall of democracy, it involves a process where the majority of people have to vote for people they don't know. So I don't know how that system is supposed to succeed. And I think that's why they have elections in New Zealand every 3 years. So the bottom line is the thought that there needs to be a process of expression of interest given at any time to take on these higher positions, and if they give expression of interest, that you then have to go through training. You have to lift your understanding of all the requirements that are required. But that's just a thought.
Kia ora koutou. Ariana Estoras, toki kapu pohatuiri and toki te kotahi tanga marae. Yes, so we just kind of, some of the things that have already been talked about, probably are leaning more towards example one with a miri around bolstering these trustees around skills and experience that we need that might not be in the other trustees. The reason why not example 2 or 3 was a bias that could potentially be created for that trustee back to that whare or to that marae. There's one whakaro there.
Common sense goes out the door.
Kia ora koutou, Brett Crown. My table has decided we're going to go with example 1. Current process remains. Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou ira, ka rangona ki roto I tēnei ruma he rereke ta ia tepu. Some had questions, some said status quo, some had a variation on tētahi wera. Kei te pērā ngā hui katoa, kei te pēnei. He rereke ngā kōrero ka whakaputa mai ia tepu. So you will get the survey if you want to percolate on the things that have been discussed at your table, and then ka whakamaro I roto I a koe where you sit, or you want to test it with people. So there is another chance to respond that way. But for now, thank you for your kōrero on the first 2 questions. We do have a bit more to get through, but we'll just break for a little supper. And then please bring your plates back. And once most people are sitting down, then we'll just carry on and have a working supper. Ka pai? Ma Dagi tō tātou kai e whakarite?
Me karakia tātou. E te atua whakapaingia mai a mātou kai hei oranga ma mātou tinana, whāngai tahi o mātou wairua ki te taro te ora, koe hiko reiti tō mātou kai whakaora. Āmene.
He's gone to Maratā with Iri.
Oh, yeah, because and then I heard everyone passed away. You know. Oh, yeah, no, I was at another tangi, and. You know, he rang me. He was on his way home, and he was sitting in traffic, and he rings me.
Yeah, yeah.
I said, "Oh, where are you?" I'm sitting in traffic. You were saying, so we're up to 20,000, which is not bad for the album. The last LA Duke is 15 grand on song.
Kapai, we'll just get started, and for any of your mates who are coming in, you can explain to them. So, notwithstanding the point made earlier that kuratou are not actually a majority when they're 7 of 14, we have a slide that talks about them being a majority, because it is as compared to kurarere. So at the moment, your kuratou trustees are 7 and your kurarere are 6. And so this question is really getting at whether you think if there are any changes made to the representation model, does it need to stay that as kuratou compared to kurarere, there needs to be more kuratou, or are you not sort of focused on that as a balancing requirement? We've already heard someone say that the kurarere needs to go down, so you could bring that kōrero into here if you like. We do have another slide that is focused on the actual number of the board, so you could bring it up there. Yeah, so this slide is really getting at whether there's any strong view that the number of kuratau versus kurarere needs to stay higher, or if it all balanced out, if that was equal, you wouldn't mind. So, koera te whakaaro. We've got a few more questions to get through, so we'll do this pretty quickly, I think. Yeah, ka pai. Ka pai, korite. Ai. Me tīmata ki hea. Koe kei te riri, start us off. Ki wanganui?
Okay. So one of the whakaaro was, what is the business for the board and what is the business for, home? And what's the capabilities you need for the board and what's the capabilities you need for home? And then how do we ensure that there's a strong kura tau voice, but it may not necessarily mean 7 people around the table. So overall, reduction to 7. I'm kind of not into the othering. It's a kura tau, it's a kurarere. It's just like, these are just our people. We just need the capabilities, and they might come from either place. But there's capabilities for the board and capabilities for the mahi on the ground. And there's got to be a mechanism to get that strong voice from kura onto the board. So I would have a special rep there for kura, and they're not precluded from going for the others.
Tautohe katoa tērā kōrero. Kia ora.
Pretty much similar to what Miss is saying about that, but you know that there probably does need a majority kura tau, but not saying that it needs to be the amount of numbers that we have at the moment, and that maybe a 3-4 or something, some kind of split like that might work. But also that, and similar to what Miss is saying, is that the marae need a forum, but it's not necessarily, is it the board that is their forum? That if they had a fully functioning rōpū whakahaere where marae have their own kind of space to speak about marae operations and development that's relevant to them, and then they have maybe 2 or 3 that represent them as kura tau. Yeah, so that's kind of what we got to.
We didn't really land on this one. We had lots of kōrero, but I think what we did agree with the other rōpū was having some competency skill sets in there.
It's sort of a repeat. If everyone is there to represent all the iwi, it doesn't matter if it's 5 and 6 or whatever. But I think what is needed is a very clear understanding of why you're there and the roles that you play. So the balance in the numbers is probably not important. Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou. So the next slide is unpacking this number of the board question that we've already had people start to think about. I guess the question is, how many trustees do you think should be on the Te Nehinehe Nui board and why? Keeping in mind the balancing of representative voice, the mahi that the Te Nehinehe Nui trustees are required to do, e rā momo āhua, and or e rā momo whakaaro, and and so striking that balance between representation, diversity of views, a reduction. Some people say that a reduction leads to greater efficiencies, but also I expect many of us have worked with small inefficient boards as well. So that assumption should be tested, I think, as a starting point. Hoi anō, ko te pātai, is there a strong view in this room that the current number is not appropriate, or the current balance, or the current makeup? And so if you do think it should be reduced, how do you propose that would happen? If you are a proponent of reducing the number of kura tau seats, then what would that look like? And how do you think that would be communicated to the various whare? Koiranga whakaaro. Hei wānanga mā koutou, and then feeding back your responses. Ka pai. Ka pai. Korite, Glenn, ka timata i a koe.
Kia ora tātou. So, where we ended up, I think we ended up at either 14 or 15. And the basis for that is, well, so my personal view, I'm a bit schizophrenic. So on the one side, I agree that the numbers should be reduced. On the other, though, I understand, and I come from the whare that was added in, so when there was originally 6, and there was a promotion to 7.
Last in, first off.
And so the first sort of question that comes to me is, if we're going to reduce it, which one is to go? And if I was responsible for that decision, that would be a very difficult decision. I think if we're having a review now at 5 years, perhaps in another 5 years we say to the whare, if you want to amalgamate, if you want to reduce, that's a discussion you can have amongst yourselves, and if you come to some agreement, let us know. But as it stands, the number remains. We had a bit of a discussion, and we might be, are we going to have a discussion on the Kingitanga rep in a separate slide?
There is a slide at the end where that Kaupapa can come up. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll pick it up now. So we support a Kingitanga representative, and then this is my own view, and it might be a little bit different to the rest of my table, but in terms of the kaumātua rep, I have a view that that shouldn't be a voting trustee. I think there should be a kaumātua or koroheke ruruhi in the meetings to support trustees in terms of tikanga matters, but I don't think they should be a voting trustee. And I think about my time on the board, and I think about Uncle Tifa, particularly at the end, and there was a lot of sort of pressure on our kaumātua at that time for some pretty significant take, and I just have a lot of aroha for them. I think again there should be someone there, not necessarily a voting trustee, but a koroheke ruruhi to support the board. But yeah, I don't think that should be a voting, responsible trustee with all the responsibility that comes with that role. Koira tāku.
Kia ora tātou. So we got down to 9. We thought, tino tautoko ana te kōrero e pāna ki te kingitanga. Really think it's been something that it's actually been brought up at every single workshop I've listened to, and has been spoken about on the pai for a number of years. And it's not just about representation, it's about our responsibility as maniapoto to that movement. We also had a kōrero about the kuratau and the important roles that they have, and again it comes down to this resourcing to allow them to have the legs that they need and the resources that they are required for the work that the rest of us don't have to do, and we have the privilege to just go back home and they've done it all. So, but if they had that resourcing, those numbers could potentially come down. That may look like maybe 5 seats for kuratau, but they have a rōpū whakahaere that they have representation on, and maybe they can also be independently recruited onto other committees as they see fit as well. And then we thought 3 kurarere as well, so that goes to 9.
Probably the other thing that we've touched on just very briefly is the ahu and waihakurangi structure, and it hasn't come up in this, but it should. But if we were to, and before I get told you can't do anything with ahu because of the Māori Fisheries Act, it's not actually correct if we maintain the independent percentage and the term. So if those independents were to roll up to be kurarere and there were still 3 maintained, then you could alter what ahu and waihakurangi looks like. Problem for me personally, and this wasn't the view of the group, is that we are so big governance-wise, organisational structure-wise, and we're 5 years into a post-settlement. So let's draw it back and get more efficient and actually pay our governance what they should be paid.
Kia ora. We agree with some of what's been said, including a kingitanga rep. We think that should be brought back. We think that maybe the number is not really important. It's the capability and the clarity of purpose. That's the main thing, that trustees are clear about their purpose. You know, if you had 14 highly functioning board members, what would that mean for us? There's maybe a bit more of a risk to go too low. We hate to see sort of a concentration of a lot of kind of power and control in a few people who maybe aren't in touch with a lot of other people. We think everyone needs training. It's not just about train up our young people, and it's everyone. And on that note, we think, you know, there should be a space for rangatahi, true blue, full trustee on there. It's their future we're designing. So they should be there. And I'll just hand it over to one of the rangatahi at the table.
Yeah, we deserve a seat too, whānau, so I second that kōrero. I do think that just on top of that, we are in the future of AI, so governance and all of that stuff. Sorry for those that might think I'm wrong, but AI is taking over your fellas' jobs. And so I think rangatahi are more in touch with what's happening technologically, and I think we are a big asset and should be having just as much of a say at the table as what everybody else have a say at the table. And yes, kia ora.
Kia ora, aroha te kanoa, tōku ingoa. I'm just interested, first of all, I support the kingitanga rep. In regards to the numbers, I'm not sure. What I do find interesting is reducing the governance fees. I think it'd be nice to know what's happened past and the trustees attending the hui. Is it 100%? If not, then what happens if they don't turn up? So, anyway, kia ora.
We went for what's the mahi, and then once we got the mahi, we were like, actually, it's 7. But we weren't reducing anything else because we had that separate forum for the whare. And the whare would be supported by a sort of whare service centre function and some pūtea to support the mahi that's being asked of them in the deed. And then because they've got that support, we thought actually of the 7, 2 strong voices from Kuratou, and they could come from among them, or they could choose somebody else to be a strong advocate for them. And then Kirikiriroa was 5, and they could also stand for Kirikiriroa. So 7 voting seats. And then we talked about the advisories, and I know Kingitanga's come up, but we were Kingitanga, yes, Kaumātua, yes, rangatahi, we were 50-50. I'll share my view on the rangatahi. Rangatahi can have all 5 of those seats if they want them. They just have to exercise the vote because they've got the most powerful voting bloc of anyone. So I'm like, rangatahi, vote, and you get 5 seats instead of 1.
Ka pai. Okay, this, so etahi o ngā rōpū kua kōrero kētia tēnei. So this is about the current seat that is on your 14. So currently your rōpū kaumātua appoints your kura kaumātua. So this question is twofold. Do you think that the kaumātua group needs to continue to have a voting trustee, or should that move to an advisory role? And we've already had at least 2 tables comment on that. So we're keen to hear what others think about this idea. And then the other aspect we're keen to hear about is whether people understand currently how the rōpū kaumātua, I guess, functions and operates, and how they get from their rōpū kaumātua to the appointment of their kura kaumātua. So if in a world the deed doesn't change because the resounding view is that a kura kaumātua needs to be there to represent that group, are there any views about the way in which they go about their processes? Ka pai? So sort of twofold. Kei te pai, kua rite ki te whakaoki mai ngā whakaro. Tērā pēr ka tīmata ki muri rā matua Dan ki tō tepu, ana ka huri pēnei mai. Yeah, we'll change up the flow.
Kia ora anō. I don't think that it's the kaumātua, so much pressure for them to have voting rights. I just don't think it's right.
And the other aspect is we've got to remember we're placing the burden of responsibility for kawa and tika on the shoulders of one kaumātua in that scenario, bearing in mind that TNN already have a group called Te Mauri o Maniapoto that matters for kawa and tikanga can be referred to. So I don't mind them being a fully functioning trustee, but they're there for the ears of Te Mauri o Maniapoto, not the māngai of Te Mauri o Maniapoto.
We couldn't agree, I guess. There is some of it more of the thought of some of what we've just heard before, of the kaumātua not really having that pressure, being there to sort of awhi everyone around the table and not having to take a position maybe against or, aligned to anyone else as a full voting trustee, and just to not have that pressure, and for to be able for that advisory role to maybe be switched in or out as needed, so that there isn't constant pressure on one person either, to provide that tikanga kawa, wairua support for the board. The other thought, though, is that there are some very onto-it kaumātua who can foot it at a board table for, several years and several terms and be highly effective governors. And I guess maybe they could go through the normal process of election like anybody else in that case. But, we weren't quite settled on that. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, we were definitely split on this one, and the context for me is I had a very strong mother who was a governor from the beginning of te whakakitenga right through to her 80s. And in her 80s, she held that position, really strong. And so I thought about her as we were thinking about this partai, and thought that if she was shifted to an advisory trustee, it would actually diminish her intelligence, from that perspective. But what we did agree on is it depends on the person, because totally understand the liability part of it, that, we could be putting our kaumātua into a position that they're not quite comfortable with. So, we're split, different examples.
We had a good conversation, really, and it alluded to what Mr. shared as well about rangatahi, and a lot of the conversation when we're talking about kaumātua and rangatahi, you can kind of say similar things, that they have opportunity to come through kura rere or kura tau, if they, have the skills and capability. And I think also the question was, what is a kaumātua these days? Is it the age where you can get your grant, or is it because you hold certain knowledge? And I, ka tika me mihana kia koe, Dougie. When I think of Doug and I think of the wisdom that he holds and the role that he plays for our iwi, I don't think you can get your kaumātua grant yet, can you, Kaz? But and so so I suppose it's what is the purpose and what is the role of that representation, and if it is to keep us safe as an iwi, our wairua, our tikanga, then that we could find those people within kura rere and we could vote for them because we see that as an important skill that we think need to be on the table. So
Oh, I think the getting conflated with, is it a pautikanga or is it a kaumātua? But I think there's an assumption, ko sa kaumātua, that bringing the tikanga and the reo and all those other things were actually not necessarily the case. So maybe you need to rethink about that one.
Kia ora. Just recounting some history. When the Trust Board first came together, we had Te Māori or Manipuro. The languaging is very important. And then in somebody's wisdom or otherwise, they changed it to Te Kaunihera Kaumātua, which connotates something entirely different. So the languaging is quite important. The other observation was that if we crossed off the kaumātua representation and we replaced it with the kingitanga representative, we're giving away our mana, manipura mana, to the kingitanga and leaving our rōpū out. So, in isolation, okay, you can pitch up arguments to support, but we have to consider the thing in the whole. And if you did those two in isolation, that's the unintended consequences would demean our kaumātua and our rōpū te Māori.
Oh, right. Another example of a diversity of views. Kare no koutou. Oh, ara mai.
Kia ora whānau. I just want to talk to the aspects of the beginning of Maniputa Trust and my mother being a part of that. Today, she wouldn't take that role on because she has the knowledge and all of the skills involved and the work that she did to develop to this point. But I would not want her to be a part of it because she carries so much of that knowledge through that. But for her, personally, she couldn't carry that because she put all of that time in when she was young and now she's not feeling that. So I can understand that, but on Tony's point, I'm a bit the same. If we're taking our kaumātua out and replacing it with somebody else, then again we are diminishing their mana. And we've got to remember that they did get us to this point. Kia ora.
We don't want to replace. No, just to follow on, I don't think we want to, well, this is my personal view, we don't want to replace, we want to add, keep our kaumātua and have our kingitanga. And also, you know, you speak of your proud mother being 80 and serving such a long service. Well, she can be part of that five with the kōtiro. So, you know, we shouldn't restrict where they're going to sit. There's opportunity for them to be one or the other not say, well, just you're a kaumātua, you be a kaumātua. If they still got the ability and the knowledge to go on to the others, let's do it. Because we want strength there in knowledge, tikanga and everything. And then we want our young kōtiros. So, yeah, let's not restrict it. Goodbye.
Bye. Okay, so this is the last structured question, and then there's the open slide at the end for anything about the representation model that you haven't addressed yet. So your trust deed says that there's a maximum period of 9 years that someone can be a trustee. The Māori Fisheries Act, which applies to Te Nehe Nui because it's a mio, a mandated iwi organisation, says that elections, a person has to be re-elected every 3 years. But your deed has an additional layer on top of that, which says that a person can go through 3 + 3 + 3 election cycles, and then there's a mandatory stand-down period of 1 election cycle, and then they could put their hat back in the ring. So this question is, do you agree with the 9-year stand-down period, or do you disagree with the 9-year stand-down period? Ka pai?
3 years. It's a 3-year stand-down period.
It's a 1 election cycle. So yes, it's a 3-year stand-down, and then you can put your hat back in. Ka pai. So if everyone's clear, we could just go around the table and just say ho mai ngā ai, ho mai ngā kao, but if you want to wānanga it with your reasons, then... Ka pai, korite? Okay, we'll start with Missy's table. Aye. We have the ayes.
Just rationale. If you come on, you got your first term, that's assuming you don't get in. So your first term, so you get elected, that might be your first term. Let's say you become the chair in the second term, and the third term is for you to hand over as chair or train someone up. So there's a constant forced succession through the process.
Okay, te pua matua Dan?
Same. We agree. You shouldn't be condemned for more than 9 years.
I think we're saying aye. We're saying aye. Generally, good practice.
We're saying aye to the part ayes up there, but there hasn't been exploration of a longer term. And I know that you've got the meal requirement, but if you structured appropriately from the kurerere or the independents, you could allow for that. So if you had a 4-year term and then a secondary 4-year term, then you're only there for 8 years and you stand down for 1. Our concern is that you just stay on there too long. And for the 4-year term, the reason why we think it's a good idea is some people get elected, they learn that first year, the second year they're productive, and the third year they're campaigning. Momo wā.
The other hidden thing with a 4-year term, if you do the math on it, you actually save 25% of the cost.
Yeah, so just to pause, we actually did look at this, and the Māori Fisheries Act actually does say that the governors of a meal, it's not just at the ahuahu level, it's actually at the governance of a meal, is subject to an election every 3 years. So we looked at it as well. I had assumed that the Māori Fisheries Amendment Act actually changed this, so we looked at that. So you would need to have the meal status moved somewhere else, which is a whole nother, a whole nother process, which I guess is your point, is that if you moved the meal status away from Te Nehe Nui to somewhere else, then, it's koe rato. Yeah. Ka pai. Yeah, but we did look at that carefully and read the Māori Fisheries Act again to check that 3-year term thing.
I think where we ended up was we agreed that there needs to be a stand-down period. The one caution I would give, though, with the knowledge that what happened in Whakakettinga was when they got to the end of their 9-year period, they had, I think it was Linda off, Te Aratauira, Rahui off. There was a whole, knowledge that because they'd all been there since the start, since the 9-year period commenced, that meant that once they got to the 9-year period, all of that knowledge went out the door. So just, I don't know how you practically address that, but just a caution on that.
Ka pai. Okay, so anything else that you haven't been able to address already in your rōpū about the changes, improvements, to the representation model? So you can either wānanga it, or you can just put your hand up and grab the mic and air your views. Ka pai?
So just one maybe a minor thing, given some of the kōrero earlier about the comms, I just wonder whether there's an opportunity for Te Nehenehe Nui, and maybe it's tied to when the board meetings are, that you've got a comms team, you've got staff there, perhaps a pānui or something can go out, and maybe it needs to get run through maybe the board in the first instance, but that would go to board members, that would also go to rōpū whakahaere members, because they seem to be somewhat out of the loop. And there's a lot that gets put on our kura members. I think people have raised it today. Whereas if you've got a staff member who's dedicated to just getting comms out in the first instance to board members so that they can circulate it wider, and there might be in time something that gets distributed to the wider iwi, but I'm just trying to help out our kura members at the board, because I think some whare expect their kura member to be the be-all and end-all, to be the best comms person in the world, to be there on the ground in terms of taiao, to be everything. Whereas if you've got staff who, that's their day job, that's their mahi, if they can, sit in the board, summarise what gets put out of the board, take out the stuff that's confidential, obviously, but at least start to get those comms that go, again, first to the board members, but I think the wider rōpū whakahaere members, the rest of the whare need to see that, and then maybe a condensed or a sanitised version goes out to the wider iwi or something, but just something that is regular, that is like literally I'm talking about either the next day after the board or something, because otherwise the kumara vine starts if you're not getting that comms out straight away. But
kia ora whanau. Just taking the opportunity, because this is operational kind of stuff, so it's not about the trustee. I'd just like to give some whakamārama behind how our comms does work. First of all, I apologise if it's poor. I'll take that as the CEO. But the first part I want to highlight is that we do a pānui that goes out at the end of every board meeting, and that is a summary of all items that can be shared that aren't confidential. So that goes out to all of our rōpū whakahaere members. So what I'm taking from tonight is that maybe we need to check the email addresses. So I will take it as a personal crusade to ensure that we've got accurate emails, but we have currently 44 marae, 88 members that should all be receiving this information, as well as the kura representatives that receive the information. And if it's not coming, then I actually have to apologise, because we will go back and ensure that all of those addresses are correct. I just felt like I probably should put that out there in case people start thinking, man, they're not telling us anything. And we actually, everything Glenn just described, which is a sanitised version of the board minutes that can go out and be shared, is actually done. So we will get that up and running, and maybe we'll just start putting it out on our pānui to the entire iwi, because we are very much wanting to be as transparent as possible. So just wanted to give the correction there, just so I didn't have to hear from my comms person saying, hey, how come you didn't stand up for us tonight? So they do a great job. Our comms team does some tireless work, and our secretariat does a great job to ensure that those notes are taken. So we will take that on board. We've heard it tonight, and I promise you will get your, but we'll check with every rōpū whakahaere member who's currently registered with us, and we'll ensure that we get you those pānui. Ka pai.
Tēnā tātou. I have a query just around the model itself and everything that entails, in terms of, from a point of view of a rangatahi, when you look at the model, you don't actually understand what it's asking. And not just from rangatahi, I think from whānau that don't understand governance at all, or, work at Repco and all of that stuff, and don't actually understand what everything's asking. It's not easy to read, and so, like Auntie was saying, rangatahi one rangatahi on the table, they need to vote. We don't know what we're voting for, because the model doesn't actually clearly show us what's voting for what. And so if we had a model that was easy and understandable to read from a perspective where you don't understand governance or anything like that, it would be probably more inclined for people that can't come to hui and sit down and find out what a kura tau and a kura rere is, what actually is entailed in voting and how to understand it. as simplified as possible. So, I think my suggestion, anyways, here, sorry, I went to a pure college, that's why I so I think if my feedback from my point of view, and I think from a lot of my cousins around my age, and also whānau that don't come to hui or can't come to hui and don't listen to the lives or whatever, having a model that's easy to understand so that we know what we're voting for who and what kuratou or kurarere or whatever it is. Just making it a bit simpler to understand from a perspective where you don't actually know anything about it, if that makes sense. Yeah, kia ora.
I will try very hard to stick to the representation model. But I really just want to, and I've had kōrero with a number of people and been to a number of these opportunities too, and so those that don't come but have given whakaaro, just want to share that the representation is that we need to be talking about, it also isn't just on the board. There's a whole range of representation opportunities that we kind of find out about, whether it's in one of the entities, an independent person that all of a sudden is on the board and doing something, and it just seems as though, unless it's just me, but there isn't some clarity or transparency as to how we get a clear process to be able to be a part of those other representation opportunities. When I think about some of those subcommittees that we do have that have tribal members there that aren't voted in but are requested to be on there, they are really good breeding grounds and opportunities for learning. So for those that are starting to come into governance, can take those opportunities before they look at maybe coming through the governing board. So just wanted to, there could be some improvement around the transparency of how those roles are identified and how all of a sudden someone is and they're not on a board. That we know of. And then I just want to tautoko what Puhi was saying about how we get our whānau that don't come to these hui, because for Waikato being, my understanding, the largest population or largest percentage of our people living here, there's more people on the online forum than there is in this room. I think it got up to 75 on the live. So yes, there is, when we think about having these workshops, we probably need to ask the question, do we really want to talk to our people? Because we keep doing it the same way and they keep not turning up. So there's something that needs, and I'm not saying it's all on our kaimahi, because it's hard working for an iwi. I know that. But there's some things that maybe we're not reaching. There's a huge silent population. And we're sitting in here making recommendations and decisions that impact them as well. So there's maybe some collective work that we need to do about, how do we bring them to the table? What resourcing and comms can we use to bring, how do we resource kuratou to be able to bring their whānau? We all whakapapa to one of those marae that sit in those whare. How do we support them as well? So, just the whakaaro.
I just want to touch on, it's nothing to do with the trustee per se, but it keeps coming up around comms. Like, you've got quite a high threshold to get, a trustee to cross the line. And, it's 75% of the voting population. So there is something in there that we need to address structurally. And it's no reflection on, I don't think, your comms team. But, sitting in the seat of the whare as a new chair, trying to figure out how everything runs. What I've found is the defined communication channels and the process of how it works probably hasn't had time. It hasn't refined itself well enough, and it's not just from the tribe down, but from the maraes and the whare up and outwards. That whole communication matrix needs work. Even how we're feeding stuff to Shannon so he can bring the whare's issues into the to elevate them to the board, that needs to be worked out. But definitely the communication, we need to work that out better so that the future, because you're doing the second round can be effective, so that you've got a better chance of hitting that 75% when the vote does come. So, yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora, Aubrey. Brett Crown, Mangapi Marae. I just tautoko what Aubrey's saying. The comms, even for me, are really important, and I'm just a little marae rep here. And it's the comms, man. We really, and then explaining to our whānau what the kura tau and kura rere mean. We need a model that is actually going to... So I'm talking about we have to go back to grass and to come forward again. That's where I see it for me. So, yep, kia ora koutou.
Kia ora whānau. As a new member, I came on because Auntie Moiora was stepping down, and I seen a world of knowledge there that she actually blew me away when I got involved with her in the whare, the amount of work that she does, and tireless, and the knowledge. But there's also, without being disrespectful, there's a level that's falling over there too, So for me coming on and getting involved and realising that at Maniaroa we have a real disconnect with our whānau. And so for them, they didn't actually want us to be a part of the whare process. But for myself, it was like we need to represent regardless of how our whānau feel overall. Because if we're not in there, we're not sharing and we're not learning, then what have we got? So for me, this whole process is a learning process, and that we need to, work together to try and make these things happen so that we can bring our whānau in. And some of that is around the comms, but also as a whare member, I have to do so much. It's ridiculous. It's detrimental to my business and my lifestyle at times, where I have to put so much into to save the things that are happening, particularly in Kirikiriroa currently. There is so much happening that it's really starting to become a real issue. And without the support of our whānau members behind us, then we're almost standing there on our own. And Auntie Moia has been doing it for a long time, and she's been holding up the fort. So we need more of our whānau to get a little bit more involved. And, it's like, it might sound like a broken record, but yes, some financial support and some actual support from our trust to actually